Hey book bellas and fellas. Hey, how you doing? So today I wanted to do a non-spoilery review for The Silence of Girls by Pat Barker. I read this a few weeks ago and I did have to say I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was just another retelling of the Iliad, but it wasn't just another retelling of the Iliad. It was a retelling from Briseis, the slave girl who was in Achilles' camp. Briseis is our main character, and she was in a neighboring kingdom of Troy called Lernesius. I think I got it this time. And this actually predates the Troy invasion by Achilles. Briseis stands from the rooftop, and she sees Achilles storm her town, and she sees him kill her dad and her brothers and her husband, and then they start pillaging the town. And then once they're done pillaging the town, the soldiers come for the girls. Now, I will say this, there is a scene right here at the beginning where the soldiers take a girl out and rape her. So if you're sensitive to those kind of things, just be wary. Now, it's not super explicit, but they do touch on it, and they kind of tell you, like, you know, like not just one guy, it was several. So if you struggle with those kinds of things, I think I would just be a little bit wary about that. But afterwards, Briseis is taken to Achilles' camp, and he decides that he's going to make her his personal concubine. This book starts out a lot with Briseis and her point of view. The whole first section's her point of view. This book is divided up into 3 sections. The very first section has to do with her getting kidnapped by Achilles, pretty much, and taken to his camp. And then it has to do with her being his concubine. In this book, women are not allowed to say too much. They are regarded as being property, and so they have to keep quiet. And so that's like where this book gets The Silence of Girls from. Another really interesting aspect that I found about this is the fact that you don't really get any real dialogue from Achilles and Briseis together. Most of the dialogue that you get, that you actually hear, is between Briseis and the other women in the camp, especially the women that she has been kidnapped from. And it's kind of a little bit broad because I guess Achilles speaks a slightly different language than Briseis does. So not only when he speaks, she doesn't quite understand him, so I think that is kind of reflective on the title itself. But I think more so than anything, women are expected to not speak at all unless they are spoken to. The whole first section is from her point of view, and because this is from Briseis' point of view, you kind of feel her pain that she's going through right now with having to adjust to being in Achilles' camp. This is such a struggle for her. I loved having her opinion because the point of view of this whole thing was a lot more emotional when it was coming from her perspective, especially towards the beginning, when she was trying to adjust to the fact that her husband and her brothers and her father got murdered by Achilles. Religion is such a huge portion of what they believed in back then. In order for you to cross over to the other side, you had to be buried properly. What they believed in ancient Greece is in order for somebody to truly go over into the underworld, they had to pay the ferryman. So when somebody's buried properly, they put coins on their eyes before they cremate them. This whole process allows them to take those coins off their eyes in the underworld and pay the ferryman to get across to the underworld. So Briseis has this huge unrest about how she's feeling about everything, and she is just really upset. She just feels like her brothers and her father and the people that Achilles slaughtered that were really close to her cannot rest properly because they did not have anything to pay the ferryman with. Therefore, they are not able to get into the underworld because they cannot cross the river Styx. It's kind of interesting. I loved how it was framed, how you got to see how big of a part their mythology was to them. And you really felt that from her. You really understood that this was important, that how people were handled after they died was so important to them. Now, I don't think that is super far off from what we go through on a day-to-day basis when somebody we love dies. Usually to us, burying somebody gives us peace of mind. To them, burying somebody gives their loved ones who have died peace. But this was such a refreshing view. Another thing that I truly, truly enjoyed about this book was that Achilles wasn't just somebody that we knew from legend. He wasn't just somebody that was this big war hero. To Briseis, he's the man that murdered her family. And so she critiqued him like crazy. And I loved that. Witnessing Achilles through her eyes gave us a totally different perspective on everything having to do with Achilles. He no longer was just a legend, he was a man, and he was, according to her, a giant child. Now, for the first month that Achilles and Briseis are together, he doesn't really take much of an interest in her other than, you know, like, wham bam, thank you ma'am. Nothing like in particular that's special about it. But then, because of how upset Briseis is, she decides to go start bathing in the ocean before she beds Achilles. And come to find out, Achilles has mommy issues. Achilles was actually born from a sea goddess, and the sea goddess abandoned him when he was a young kid. So this woman, who is his mother, left a giant hole in his heart. Well, then Briseis all comes, you know, like swaggering onto the bedroom smelling like ocean, and he's like, mommy. And I'm thinking, whoa, dude. There should be counselors back then, but there wasn't, so we'll let that slide. It was just a little creepy, but you know, I get it. While this book was being told from Briseis' perspective in the first section, it was very gritty because her emotions were very raw, and once again, I loved the emotional flavor that she added to this first section. Now, once we get to the second section of this book, it kind of flip-flops a little bit on point of view. You get to hear a little bit from Achilles about his perspective on the whole thing, which honestly, he's a little bit emotionally dead. I mean, I guess he would have to be to have killed that many people. And you don't feel the same kind of emotion from his perspective that you do from even his friend Patroclus, who he grew up with. And I don't know how many of you know the story of the Iliad, which is, you know, this is like a variation of retelling from the Iliad. This is not just a variation of the retelling of the Iliad. This is so much more than that. This is gritty, this is emotional, this gives you a little insight into Achilles, and it gives you a little bit of insight into Patroclus. And for those of you who don't know who Patroclus is actually a childhood friend of Achilles. Patroclus was a son of a king who, in his childhood, enraged, decided to go and kill his friend. The king decided to take Patroclus to Achilles and ended up having him enslaved to Achilles. After that, Patroclus and Achilles were lifelong friends, and they became completely inseparable. And then Patroclus would go on to become Achilles' right-hand man in war. So this was a really interesting and fun read. I really enjoyed this. I don't want to get too far into this because, especially if you haven't read this book, but I do want you to kind of know a little bit about what this book is about. And I have to say that I did thoroughly enjoy this. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm not going to do spoilers here, but if you are interested in getting spoilers, I'm going to leave a link, and that link is going to be connected to another video that has to do with spoilers for this book and my thoughts on those spoilers themselves. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that little rough summary of the first section of Silence of Girls by Pat Barker. If you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the little bell icon if you want to receive emails every time I post. And as always, thank you so much for watching.